telling me to let me just let me
That clock keeps ticking like a metronome, and my thoughts keep telling me to get me home, but my balls keep telling me to let me just let me
The Marc and Sons Diver, the first automatic wristwatch I ever bought for myself, an excellent contender, and after 2 years of ownership, I think it's high time to do a video discussing why I think it's such an excellent value for money micro brand watch. So being a first watch, it does carry some sentimental value. The reason why I bought it all those years ago was because of its layout, the aesthetic that it carried, the way that the dial was presented with the bezel and the case, but more importantly about the features that was offered with the watch when I bought it. I've considered this to be a upmarket Seiko, if that makes sense. I wasn't very interested in the appeal of Seiko watches, but I found that this was a very interesting in-between because of everything that it had in its arsenal. So let's just talk through some of the details about the watch in a nutshell. General dimensions and specifications. This is a 42mm diameter watch with a 15mm case. So it is considered to be a oversized dive watch in that realm. The case size does play a part in that role, and I think it's important. As I carry on with the video, you'll see what I mean. It comes with a very nice domed sapphire crystal that is rock solid, and a Miyota 9015 automatic movement, which first time I've ever experienced it is a very good performer, on par with an ETA 2824 for a fraction of the cost. So if we look at the dial in a bit more detail, it really looks good. I must say the printing on the dial could be reduced, but overall we look at the date window, how it's framed, we look at the numerals all polished with BGW9 lume, and I'll put up a lume shot to show you what it looks like. The case all around is polished, and the lug width is nice and short. I would say it falls into the category of about 49 to 50 millimeters in length. I don't even think it's that much. There's some nice elevation to the height of all the numerals, and you can also notice that there is a AR coating, which is very subtle. It doesn't get in the way. It's very unlike the Steinhardt Ocean 1, which has a very jarring AR coating. Because the glass is domed, it hides a lot of that color. Now what I thought I would do is bring up, lo and behold, the Jeanneau Ocean Rover side by side. And the reason why I do this and the reason why I show this watch a lot is because of its dimensions. Most of us have a general understanding of what a 40mm dive watch looks like. So in comparison, you can sort of make a judgment call on the two and what they look like. So just looking at them side by side, they look almost identical in size. But since I've said that this is a 42mm, you can sort of judge that there is a bit of a difference between the two. Notice how the lume stands in comparison to the golden sand lume of the Jeanneau. It's a much starker white color. And we look at the glass. This uses a boxed sapphire, where this is domed. You can see the distortion, the difference between the two. And if you notice, you can see me very easily in the Jeanneau. If I flick it around, you can see my face, you can see the stand. But in this, it's a lot more difficult to see. And overall, the legibility is much better in this because of that dome and because of the amount of AR coating. It's much more legible to see from any angle, which is quite interesting to look at. Looking at the bezel, it is a 120 click bezel. And it lines up perfectly. What I've noticed, I'll get into some of the discussion about the things that I don't like about the watch, but what I've noticed is that the bezel is very respondent. It performs very well. It doesn't have any backplay. And overall, it sits very flush with the case. It doesn't stand out too much. It doesn't really shout and scream. If we compare bezels, we can see that the Jeanneau has a bezel that is a bit more prominent when I talk about the teeth, but the Marc and Sons is a little bit more subdued in that nature, which is quite nice. It sort of backs off on the tool aesthetic. And just from a one-to-one perspective, you can see that Well, I personally think the Marc and Sons looks a lot less aggressive than the Jeannot. But then in saying that, there are a few things that the Jeannot does a lot better, talking about its aesthetic, focusing more on a Rolex style watch, that this could benefit from. So on the wrist, this is how 42mm wears on my 7-inch wrist. As you can see, the case height is pretty tall, but overall its size and dimensions do fit very well as a contemporary sized watch. And legibility is something that I'll cover at a later stage, but I think that's one of the biggest selling points about this watch overall. After a quick strap change, you can see that it transforms the watch completely. And that's something I can really attest to, is the fact that this watch knows how to wear straps very well. It came standard on a stainless steel bracelet, and the bracelet was 22mm and tapered down to 20, and it looked so lethargic, sort of put the proportions out for me. So very soon I put that aside and decided to only wear this on NATO straps and leather straps, and it really fits the feature well. What I like the most about it is the fact that the NATO reduces the overall size of the watch, and I'll show you that in a second. If we look at how the case looks relative to the bezel, the overall dimensions are reduced greatly because of the way the strap sits on it. And if I bring up the Jeannot once again, you'll notice that now side by side they look almost the same size, which I find fascinating. Just that little visual change turns the watch into a contender against this for 40mm. This watch was never intended to be anything but a tool watch. I plan to use it on a daily basis as something that I would use at the gym, just as a general wear and tear utility. And the main reason why I liked it so much is because of how beefy it is in its build. If you feel this, if you had to pick it up and actually feel it in your hand, you would realize how heavy everything is. Everything has been over-engineered, or should I say, over-designed, for the purpose of it being able to take a hit and continue further. I gave this watch to my dad a few months ago. Now, a bit of a background is he's never worn an automatic watch, and he loves this thing, and he wears it every day because of the fact that he knows he can depend on the fact that this thing will not break or be damaged. As you can see, there are a few little micro scratches on the side of the case. But he uses this in the garage, he uses this when he works on cars, just like me when we go to the gym, in the pool every day, cycling, all the rest. This watch hasn't even, apart from the few micro scratches, hasn't skipped a beat. And I think that's the biggest selling point of these dive watches, is the fact that you can really depend on them. The joke is that this is probably one of the most famous watches on my channel because of a video that I shared a few months ago where I taught you how to do this. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go back and you watch it. A small little change, and 1, 2, 3. The NATO doesn't have any extrusions at the back. All the components are on the underside, comfortable to the wrist, and the watch sits very comfortably. And the reason why I came up with this idea for the NATO is because when you double stack an already, thick NATO on a very thick case, the watch really sits tall. As it is, this watch sits tall, but as it's a single strip, now all of a sudden it is very comfortable. And if I haven't mentioned this before, I should say that a khaki NATO strap is ideal for a light colored skin. It makes it so undercover, so low in profile. It's just so cool. I love this combination. And this is the combination that my dad wears on a daily basis. Also very subdued. As you can tell, it follows a similar line. It's the same color scheme as the original Bond RAF style NATO, but it is a one piece, so it's more accurate to the time period. And what's interesting is that it's a much heavier duty style of NATO. The level of nylon, or should I say the concentration of nylon in the strap is greater, which makes it a lot more rigid. But he enjoys it because of the colors. It sort of harkens back to his military days. And overall it is a lot more comfortable, and you don't really have to faff too much when it comes to fitting it together because it's only one piece. You don't have to worry about threading the needle or doing any of that stuff. So another wrist change. Not as cool as the khaki combination in my opinion, but it is very understated and very subdued, and I think it's nice to see these separation lines between the strap. It gives it a bit more visual interest, all the while keeps it very low-key and understated. So the problem areas. First, I can say that the bezel, though it functions very well, it's very, very well seated, the ratchets extremely well. The knurling on the edge of the bezel is very difficult to grip. On dry land it's okay, but when you're in the water and your fingers are all pruned and the watch is soaked, it is virtually impossible to turn. And that's a big problem, especially when you're working with a dive watch that needs to be submersed. You have to set the bezel when you're outside of the water for maximum effect. But the biggest overall concern with this watch is its crown. If I bring up the Jeanneau one more time to show what it looks like side by side, you can see that the Jeanneau crown is almost twice the width than the Marc and Sons crown. This is a bit of a contentious point because some people don't enjoy large crowns. My dad personally thinks that crowns shouldn't be on the sides of the watches at all. They should be underneath. And I've seen some very interesting designs where they've been seated at the top or underneath, keeping the lines symmetrical. And it's generally setting watches with crowns. It only happens once every few days, depending on how you wear it. If it's an automatic watch, you don't even have to worry about winding it. Generally, the rule of thumb with a dive watch is that it has a big crown, so it's easy to grip when you're wearing a pair of gloves or anything else. This crown is way too small for the size of watch. And if I turn it around and open it, you can see what I mean when I take it away. I mean, just for comparison's sake, I have the Alpha Daytona next door. I mean, the Alpha has a bigger crown. And I mean, this thing it's a manual wind, so I guess it's useful, but it's a bit of a problem. I do like the crown guards though. I think that's a nice addition, and the crown does seat itself very well in between the crown guards. Arguably, I'd say better than the Jeanneau, because half of the crown is sticking out for the Jeanneau's version. But the problem is this crown is very dainty and very small. It's difficult to grip. I mean, you have to really have small fingers in order to grab it. You can see the threads are extremely small. If I bring it up really close, you can see the threads that the crown fits on are very, very small inside there. Overall, setting the watch, because it's a 90-15 movement, it's a very good movement. Performs very well. I've pulled it out to the first position to set the date. You can see the date wheel cycles very well. It's great. But when it comes to setting the watch, the crown stem wobbles quite a bit, which is a bit of a problem, and it is very small. When it comes to threading the crown back in, that's another story, and let's have a look at that now. When I return it and start the movement again, because it has such small threads for the crown to fit on, you have to really be careful. And a rule of thumb that I generally use is I sort of add a little bit of pressure to the case. I turn away from the thread and then I screw it onto the thread. And that's something I can give you all as a piece of advice, is that it really helps when it comes to screwing down crowns, is to turn it away and then onto the thread. That way you won't thread the watch, or should I say thread the crown at all when you're fitting it on. It fits very snugly to the case, as you can see. It seals up very well. And I think the biggest bonus about having a small crown, especially with a dive watch, is the fact that it doesn't allow any opportunity for water to enter into the case. As we know, dive watches have to be very airtight. So I guess that's a nice thing about having a smaller crown. Being a 42mm watch, a smaller crown means that it doesn't get in the way of your wrist when you're wearing it. So that's something. Overall, I can say that this is an excellent watch. For the value you're paying for, the fact that it performs so well and still continues to perform well. This watch is worn every single day and is still excellent, in excellent condition, still works hard. And what I can say is that once you separate yourself from the idea that this is an expensive object and start using it for its intended purpose, is the time when watches really start surprising you. So thank you for watching this clip. I hope you've been able to take something away from it. And to all my new subscribers, thank you for joining. I'll be sure to bring out some new videos very soon, and some new watches are on the way. I'll keep you posted. Cheers for now.